Players are the essential heroes and villains of D&D, and Matthew Mercer has some tips about how players can get the most out of Dungeons & Dragons.
There are players that love the dungeon crawl, kick down doors, kill things, take loot, mentality, and that's fun for them. And then there are players that are more involved in the dramatic elements of it, and the character interactions, and the revealing of plot devices and character backstories, and big epic arcs. If you find yourself anywhere in that spectrum, one, communicate that to your DM early. If you're like, I'm here just to take magical items and kill big monsters, make sure they know that so they can develop a game that caters to that interest. If you are more interested in the theatrical elements of it, communicate that so the DM can prepare a story that more applies to that. And you can have players across that spectrum, and the DM now has the task and challenge to create a narrative that fulfills each of those elements. It doesn't always work, but at least they have that groundwork to try and make that function. As a player, one, I recommend, once again, communication. You want to make sure that you're talking with the players and the DM about what things you like, what things you don't. If the storyline is just getting uncomfortable for any reason, or the topic starts to go into a place you're not necessarily down with, communicate that with the Dungeon Master. Have a conversation after a session with the players about it to make sure you're all on the same page. And respect the Dungeon Master and be appreciative of the time that they're putting into this. For what time you guys are, collaborating to make this session happen, that individual has been preparing for countless hours in advance to try and gift you guys with this experience. You can still offer constructive criticism, and Dungeon Masters, don't be afraid to ask for feedback, especially if you're kind of new and you're still figuring out yourself. You guys can all together improve on both sides. But be respectful and show appreciation at the end of a session. Tell them, thank you. I loved this part. This was really fun when this sequence happened. That NPC you created, that was so great. I'm excited to see where that goes in the future. So I recommend expressing that appreciation to the Dungeon Master because it helps keep them inspired and driven to continue to run this game for you. And lastly, if you do like the narrative elements of the game, I recommend spending a little time developing a character background. Whether or not it shows up as part of the overall narrative, that's up to the Dungeon Master, but even just taking a few hours to sit down and write a page about where your character comes from, what their desires are, what their fears are, what their long-term, short-term goals are, that exercise for non-actors is an acting exercise that helps you better understand a character's personality, so that when you're in the game, you are making decisions as a player, you're making decisions as a character. And that's the bridge that you cross through experience in these games, where you begin to think outside of what you, the player, would do and what the character would do. And that distinction makes it really, really fun when you get to critical moments in the campaign where you're like, I know personally it'd be real dangerous to go into this room. My character's a thrill seeker. My character wants to see blood. He's gonna kick in that door and just rush in there screaming, and everyone else in the party's like, no, don't! But that's a moment you're all going to tell months from now about. Remember that time you kicked in the door and rushed in and we tried to stop you, and then all of a sudden the whole cavalcade of stone golems began to converge on us, and then we had to rush out as the cavern was collapsing. That was amazing. Those moments all come from the risk you take, from deciding not necessarily what makes the most logical sense for survival, but what makes sense for what your character's personality would allow. And writing those backstories and learning a little bit of where your character's coming from early on helps people who might not be as comfortable stepping into those shoes have a better place to make informed decisions like that.
Thank you, Matthew Mercer, for appearing on the show. You can watch Critical Role every Thursday at 7 p.m. on Geek and Sundry's Twitch channel. This channel is Dungeon Life. It is a show entirely about D&D, where we interview the creators of D&D, spotlights on community members like Matthew Mercer, and tips and tricks and a whole lot more. We are hoping to do live streams in the future and to improve the quality of these videos, and also have enough money to keep making these videos, and that's where Patreon comes in. Our subscribers on Patreon make sure that we can keep making these videos and improve, and we're trying to build a community where we give each other feedback on the video content. We show people early video links of the stuff we're working on, behind the scenes footage, and a whole lot more, so we can just make better videos. We could not make this show without you guys, without the amazing D&D community. All of the messages have been so helpful and so positive. We can't thank you guys enough. Thank you for watching.